So I'm Sean Brady. I work for Cushman Wakefield. I've been there almost 40 years. I've been doing the data center work, started the data center group within the firm almost 30 years ago. And during that time, as you can imagine, I've done just about most all types of transactions in the data center space. And some of the clients that I currently work with is JPMorgan Chase, the Federal Reserve, Citibank, CBS, Staples, and Unilever, just to name a few. So what I'm going to talk about today is global and U.S. 2020 hyperscale and colocation. So I'm going to jump in, and the agenda, then I'm going to go over the global trends, global construction growth, move to cloud, U.S. absorption, U.S. pricing in colo, construction growth, the top 10 markets, and then obviously the big word of the day, COVID changes and trends. Next slide. So the first slide here talks about the global trends, and mostly is all geared towards the colo and the cloud. So what we're seeing in the cloud business is that the mid-sized to large corporations today are moving into emergency mode with their IT infrastructure and trying to keep up with the distributed workforce and also the major workloads that are coming through, which are in the process of shifting to cloud, as a lot of people have said on the call, and also third-party data centers. Some of the big recipients of that business is obviously Microsoft, Amazon, Google, and they are all actually planning a second wave of expansions, and that expansion is now going to the secondary markets within the United States because they're well entrenched in the primary markets, which is a new thing for these big firms. And they're all in these secondary markets, but their expansion, as you will see in the slide, is unbelievable. So the revenue that they have experienced, we're seeing AWS with a 29% increase year over year. Azure has got a 48% increase year over year, and Google Cloud is up 45%. As people learn to work from home, these companies obviously are the benefactors of it. So on the data center front side, the data center REIT providers are also expanding to try to meet some of the demand for the cloud providers and also major corporations. And these top 5 data center providers, the REITs out there today, are planning to spend about $6 billion just over the next 24 months. Over the next 24 months, which is just amazing. So as you can see on the right-hand side of the chart, you're seeing these graphs, which look a little bit like hockey sticks. This shows Azure and Google growing a little bit faster than AWS. It's because AWS has been at this longer. They've had most of the market share, and these guys are playing catch up. So they structure their deals a little more flexible. The contracts are a little bit easier, and their pricing is a little more generous than what AWS might present. So that's what they have to do to try to get market share back. So as you can see at the bottom with these 4 boxes, you're seeing AWS with a 328% growth over the next 4 years. Azure has got 687% over the next 4 years. And Google Cloud has got 950% over the next 4 years. And then the other cloud providers, which is like Salesforce and firms like that, is 389. And that's just unbelievable. And by the way, let me just step back for a second and say that the 5 major US REIT players are Equinix, DRT, CyrusOne, CoreSite, and QTS. I'm going to go to the next slide. So here's the slide about global construction, which is also amazing. I mean, everything I'm going to share with you today is the numbers are going to be off the chart. So global colocation supply is expected to increase from 11.1 gigabytes to 17.6 gigabytes by 2024. This is the equivalent, just to give you a little context, this is the equivalent of 3 new Northern Virginia data center markets. And I would like to remind you all that the Northern Virginia data center market is the largest data center market in the world. So that means there's going to be about 36 million more square feet of data center space produced here in the across the globe. And again, these cloud providers and colocation companies, as you've read in the paper, they're all, at least the colocation companies are merging, as one of the other gentlemen said, with the M&A work in that business. There's a lot of consolidation that we've seen in the past 12 months in that particular sector. But these guys are trying to get into the secondary and tertiary markets, and they're finding those markets to have a little greater margin of return in those marketplaces when they bring their big names in there. And it's because they just don't have the competition like they do in the tier one markets. And you'll see that. I'll give you a list of what the top 10 are a little later in the presentation. So the graph to the right just shows you, the 13 going to 17 gigawatts. Next slide. So this slide just shows you companies moving to the cloud, and then also share with you the top five reasons why these corporations are going to the cloud. So as I've mentioned, the large to mid-sized companies today are going through an IT digital transformation, and certainly COVID is moving this along a lot quicker than it normally would be. And so the 5 things that these companies are looking for is outsourcing to pick up remote hand services, managed services, IT help desk services, IT departments. I talk to a lot of corporations all day long, across the board, all different industries, and every single IT department is shorthanded, and they've got, they all could not sleep and still not catch up with all the work because they're all incredibly busy. And that's not just because of the pandemic. That was actually even before the pandemic, just because of the digital transformation that was already really in play. The other things they're looking for is scalability and resiliency, speed to market, edge computing, and DR solutions. And of course, you can see AWS, Microsoft, Google, and these are some of the deals that were done in the last 12 months. Next slide. So this chart shows the U.S. absorption for the first half of 2020. This is quite remarkable. What we're seeing for the first half has almost eclipsed 2018. We saw about 204 megawatts leased in 2018, and that was mostly, it was 80% of that, or maybe even higher in 18, was due to the cloud companies. So here we are 2 years later, and the first half of 2020, we're seeing 200 megawatts. In 18, you saw a little bit of a drop off. We're seeing very little drop off in this third quarter, with another 180 megawatts leased. So that's a total of 380 megawatts, which really makes this a record year, and the fourth quarter is still yet to come, which is unbelievable. Next slide. So this slide addresses U.S. pricing, and you can see the compression from 2012 to today, which is getting us to the end of the third quarter. These pricings have declined precipitously, and the reason being is that these are all focused on the primary markets, the top 10 markets across the United States. So as you can see, the top line is New York City. It says the average price per kW on a meter deal for over 250 kW is about $150 per kW. I think that number is a little low for New York City based on my experience. But again, these are averages. And then you get to the line at the bottom of this chart, and that's Northern Virginia, and the average is $100 per kW. Now, again, my experience shows that I've heard numbers even lower than that. I've heard numbers for large colo and cloud deals to be somewhere around $62 to $75 per kW. I'm not quite sure how those companies are making money down around the $62, but there's just so much competition down in that Northern Virginia marketplace that, they say, okay, do I lease it now to this, first class high credit tenant, or do I sit there and wait 2 years, or just wait another couple of months and have to compete again and try to go to the same numbers? So the wisdom at the moment seems to be very aggressive, because there's a megawatt or 2 megawatts or 5 megawatts being completed. There's a couple of those being delivered every quarter down there, because it's such an expansive market, and you'll see the amount of space that's under construction down there, which is unbelievable. So the top 10 markets that we have here are Northern Virginia, Silicon Valley, Northern New Jersey, Silicon Valley, Northern Virginia, Dallas, Phoenix, Chicago, Seattle, Atlanta, LA, and New York. Next slide. So here's this next slide is showing the construction of the top 10 cities in the United States. And these figures are as of October 1st, 2020. So you've got New Jersey, New York at 19 megawatts, Phoenix 19, Dallas 22, Portland 60, Atlanta 137, and that's already an overbuilt market. Chicago 138, Silicon Valley 166, and then you've got this crazy market, Northern Virginia, 320 megawatts, which is just staggering. So the two cities that you're not noticing or you're missing here on this chart that we didn't put in here is LA and Seattle, and that's because the construction there is less than 3 kW per per market. So, and if anybody wants any information on a breakdown on a per market basis in the top 10, we can certainly provide that. Next slide. So this is what I'm going to focus on really here in this slide is the last bullet, because the best practices and trends kind of all roll into this last point. So the trends and best practices that emerged from the pandemic in IT are increased IT staff or supplemented staff to serve the workers at home and improving their environment. Increased internet encryption and VPN for home computers and cell phones, improved firewalls for corporate data centers, and the digital transformation for workers at home, as Mark alluded to, included an update administration, security, and maintenance tools that allow for better and faster work processes at home. Tools that help HR and managers like Salesforce, which Mark alluded to, employees oversight and motivation applications, better training software, HR files access, and productivity programs, improving project timelines, goals, and team building. Now, all of the early adapters who jumped into this transformation bandwagon saw less downtime, fewer unplanned absences, and greater collaboration. Most firms saw an increased performance from these changes. So those are the people that had infamous wisdom and great foresight. The result of these best practices will transform the working environment as we know it today. It will affect the types of offices and environments that will be created in the future. There will be less individual space and more meeting space. Working with people face to face is one of the biggest reasons people will come back to the office to meet, collaborate, share ideas, develop faster and better solutions, which will all have a better impact and also results on the workforce for a given company. So that's the end of my presentation, and I now will give you just two examples of two corporations that are making some significant changes in their work environment. So one is Pinterest, and I just think this is a fascinating story. Pinterest is hired a developer, picked a location in the city of San Francisco, and was building a 250,000 square foot Class A office building to create one campus to have their entire company. Pinterest decided within the last 60 days to write a check for $98 million and give it to the developer to say, I don't want to move into that building. What we've seen today has changed our mind. We don't want to have this one building with one campus, and we want out. So they wrote the check and moved on to a new strategy. And that new strategy is they saw how the work from home environment affected their company. And it did in a very positive way. And obviously the next component I'm about to mention is it really lowered their cost overhead. They could hire people in North Dakota, Montana, Kentucky, Tennessee, Louisiana, Alabama, and get great quality employees for a lot less pay, and also working in an environment that makes them very happy and gets them to the same result that they would if they built this corporation in which they thought. So they feel that this decision and solution would still work very, very well, and they feel that their employees, because most of them are young employees looking to work in the tech industry, that in that particular sector was really, really enjoying that. The next one is a major corporation, major insurance company headquartered in Hartford, Connecticut, and I'm sure you all know the names of the ones that are up there. This is one of them. These guys have a very large call center, and they had already had their call center employees, a third of them working from home. And so when the pandemic hit, the IT department knew what they needed to do to improve the homes of the people who were not working from home and working in the offices. And so they immediately went to work, solved all those problems, and found that all the majority of the call center people who were working from home, a lot of them really enjoyed it. And so that particular company is going to make a significant change and move even more people to their home for the call center function. And I'm sure there's plenty of more examples like that particular example that we're going to see that'll change the office space landscape, unfortunately, across the United States. So that's my last example, and